Second guest is Senator Joe Lieberman, who represented Connecticut in the Senate for 24 years. Senator Lieberman served as both the chairman and the ranking member of this very committee. In 2012, he helped author the new Columbia Admissions Act, the first D.C. statehood bill to be introduced in the Senate in nearly 20 years. Senator Lieberman, you may proceed with your statement.
Thanks very much, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and members of the committee for convening this hearing today and for giving me the honor of testifying. Delegate Norton, Mayor Bowser, and other distinguished witnesses, it's a pleasure to be with you here. As Senator Carper alluded to, just a few years ago, Delegate Norton and I were at law school together, and we haven't aged at all since then. I will point out that the mascot of we were lucky to go to Yale. The mascot at Yale is a bulldog, and I don't think anyone would argue with me if I said that Delegate Norton on this particular issue, and many others, has had the tenacity of a bulldog, occasionally the bark, and if necessary, the bite. So it's always good to be on her side. A special thank you, talking about tenacity, to Senator Carper, my dear friend, for introducing and advocating this legislation, which really would right a wrong that has been done for too long to the residents of the District of Columbia. I'm honored, really personally, to have the opportunity to return to this committee in this room where I spent so many of the best, most productive days of my 24 years in the U.S. Senate, in large part because I was privileged to work in bipartisan partnership with the leading Republicans on the committee during that time, first Fred Thompson of Tennessee, and then for more than a decade, Susan Collins of Maine. I hope that spirit of bipartisanship, which has been part of this committee's history and really has been exemplified, I think, already this year by Chairman Peters and Ranking Member Portman, will guide your committee's consideration of the deprivation of voting representation in Congress for citizens of our capital city. As you know, as far as anyone can tell, the only citizens of any capital of any country in the world who are disenfranchised in this way. I first introduced legislation on this subject in 2002, when some of the current committee staff members were probably in elementary school. It was called the No Taxation Without Representation Act, and was, I'm pleased to say, reported favorably from the committee, but was not acted on by the Senate. In 2009, a group of us introduced the D.C. House Voting Rights Act, which was favorably reported by this committee and, in fact, passed by the Senate in a vote of 61 to 37. Unfortunately, however, the Senate added an amendment that repealed D.C.'s gun control laws, and therefore the House never acted on the legislation. In 2012, which was my last year in the Senate, a group of us introduced the D.C. statehood legislation, which is very much like Senator Carper's initiative that is before you today. But Senator Carper's done a much better job than I did. He's got the largest ever number of co-sponsors for this legislation. It's really a tribute to the cause and to his tenacity and advocacy. When Senator Carper asked me if I would get involved in supporting the current proposal, I immediately said yes. The truth is, I was very grateful to Tom for giving me the opportunity to re-engage in this constitutional cause that's mattered to me for a long time. And it's mattered to me because there are two great American constitutional principles that are at the heart of the cause of D.C. statehood and that are violated every day in the current treatment of residents of the District of Columbia. Both of these principles were central to the American Revolution against the British Crown. The first is that governments should govern only with the consent of the governed, not by the whim of the crown or any other leader, particularly not a dictator. And that in a great democracy, a republic like ours, that consent is given by the votes of the citizenry. The second, as has been mentioned, a great founding principle is that citizens should not and cannot be taxed without representation in the legislative body that taxes them. And here, in general, I quote Justice Hugo Black, who wrote in Westbury versus Sanders, a 1964 Supreme Court decision, "No right is more precious in a free country than that of having a voice in the election of those who make the laws under which we must live," end quote. Today's residents of the District of Columbia, as has been said, have every right to sound the battle cry of our revolution: no taxation without representation. Greater per capita income tax paid from residents of the district, and more in total than the residents and citizens of 21 other existing states. So why would anyone not want to eliminate these grossly outdated, un-American inequities? Today, you will hear some arguments why from the witnesses who will testify against Senator Carper's legislation. I must say respectfully that I've heard the arguments before many times over the years, and I suppose as judges say, I've reached a decision. All the arguments seem to me to be legalistic disputations and ultimately excuses for something that is inexcusable. The arguments against this legislation don't come near to overcoming the great principled constitutional arguments for it. So what's the problem? Well, the media suggests it is not constitutional or philosophical, but political and partisan. That Republicans today fear that granting equal voting representation in Congress to D.C. residents will inevitably lead to 2 more Democratic senators and 1 more Democratic member of the House. I hope that is not the problem, because it is self-evidently unacceptable in America to condition the enjoyment of constitutional rights on political party membership, any more than Congress would condition access to constitutional rights on citizens' race or gender or religion or sexual orientation. Besides, it's just not sensible to base one's vote on this legislation, which would correct an injustice forever, on a short-range political prediction, which, based on history, may well turn out to be baseless or at least temporary. Who among us can really predict how the citizens of the state of Washington, D.C. will vote in elections for the representatives in Congress in 50 years or 20 years or even 5 years? For example, who would have predicted 5 years ago that the state of Georgia would elect 2 Democratic senators to this Congress? Who could have predicted 30, 40, 50 years ago that there would be almost no Republicans from New England, my part of the country, in the Senate today, and almost no Democrats from the House, which is obviously why we were so surprised by the election of the 2 Democrats from Georgia. A look at American history shows that partisan anxieties have been common when states have been considered for admission to our union since the original 13. But 37 times these anxieties were overcome to enable us to become the United States of America we are today. Here's an example which I think proves the difficulty of deciding this issue based on political predictions. In 1959, Alaska and Hawaii were both seeking admission to our union. There was a lot of concern about how the citizens of those states would vote. They were essentially both admitted together, though there was a separation of a few months, because they were expected to balance each other politically. Alaska was expected to vote Democratic, and Hawaii was expected to vote Republican. That was the bipartisan consensus prophecy in 1959. I could tell you in my 24 years in the Senate, and still today, the opposite is the case. Hawaii elects Democrats, and Alaska has elected Republicans. So much for deciding great constitutional issues, such as this one, because of passing political prognostications. It's not only a weak basis for judgment, it's unacceptable in our system of law and equity. Mr. Chairman, many times in my 24 years on this committee, our members were able to find bipartisan solutions to difficult problems and then to convince the Senate to agree with those solutions, and together we got some great and good things done for our country, I'm proud to say. I hope you members of the committee in this session will similarly rise to the challenge of this moment and this problem and work together to get something good and great done for our country, our Constitution, and for the people of our capital city. Thank you very, very much.